I'm delighted to be joined by Neil Smith from Motorvait.
15 years now working within the motor industry. My expertise is used car volume retail. When the opening question I ask, put your hands up if you know how many cars you sold. All put their hands up. Right, now keep your hand up if you know how many leads you generated. Everybody put their hand down. And if you haven't got your lead number, how can you work out your conversion? How can you work out your return on investment? How do you know which sales of your sales team are doing well and they're doing better than others, and which ones need help training or performance management? I would say you've got to start to understand your numbers through the funnel.
Okay. And welcome to the Dealer Tech Talk, the podcast where we explore technology shaping modern dealerships. I'm Simon Verona, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Neil Smith from Motorvait.
Thank you.
Neil, welcome.
Thanks very much, Simon.
Good. You've been involved in many sides of the motor trade, from being in the dealerships with people like Imperial Cars and more amusingly, I guess, with Cazoo, and now obviously with Motorvait, with your advisory work. For those who don't know you, if I was to meet you in a lift, what would you tell me about you that would make me want to work with you?
Okay, so you're looking for that classic elevator pitch. So, look, I suppose I'd start off with experience, 15 years now working within the motor industry. My expertise is used car volume retail, as ops director at Imperial, and then retail ops director at Cazoo, albeit for a very short time. I was across every aspect of the business, so certainly with Imperial, from sourcing, pricing, marketing, preparation, sales, contact centre, and probably most importantly, myself and one of the other directors there were the sort of product owners of everything we developed, which was ultimately a complete bespoke used vehicle retailing, preparation, marketing, sales system that was a 360 view of the business. So it's obviously, I've probably got into this elevator on floor 30 and we're not down to floor 10 yet. So quite a long elevator pitch. But effectively, I can go into a business and look at any aspect of it. And what I try and do is find those incremental improvements across the piece rather than focus on one area. If we can add, as Motorvait, a % increase at every point, then it's actually quite substantial, especially when you're in that volume retail market, and every pound on 2,000 cars sold a month makes a massive difference.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think one thing that always amused me, I'm a technology guy, as you know, and numbers are my game. And clearly numbers are your game as well. You mentioned a pound a unit, when it's a lot of units over a lot of time, adds up very, very quickly. You joined in Imperial Cars. What was your original aim? Why were you employed, I guess? And how did you take that transformation from where you were when you started there, right through the years to where you ended? I mean, obviously I'm guessing it's not a radical thing, it's more incremental, but what sort of process were you doing?
100%. So, I mean, my involvement with Imperial started back in 2008. I was working for a creative agency at the time, and I took on the development with those guys of their first bespoke website. So they came out of the Auto Trader Razor product. They were a site that was selling about 80 cars, independent, one site only, doing a good job, but wanted to sort of step away from that traditional used car retail model in terms of being reliant on that Auto Trader piece and having the website with Auto Trader and all that sort of thing. So took on that development, worked on that for around about 12 months with the guys, got it to a point where it was ready to launch, and they approached me and said, look, we need somebody in-house now who's going to help push this forward, look at the marketing aspect. I mean, my background was, prior to that, was 25 years in the print industry, working as marketing director for Snow's Business Forms. Snow's Business Forms was a print company that had contracts with 18 of the major motor manufacturers for supplying print to the dealerships. So I had an understanding of the transactional role within a sort of franchise operation. So it was a weird sort of introduction to motor trade. And I took some of that with me, that sort of transactional piece as well, and looking at how we could digitize a lot of that within Imperial and reviewing everything that we were doing there from a digital perspective. And probably weirdly, once we'd launched the website, looked at it and thought, well, is this the best we can do? So within about 6 months, I was recommending we would go to somebody that had a platform that was recognised as being sort of best in practice at the time. So we ditched that original custom-built website, went into G-Force's website just to get an understanding of what a relatively good platform would look like. Within 18 months of doing that, I'd then suggested we go back into a bespoke development because we'd learned a lot from that experience, and actually there were limitations for what we wanted to do. And I think that was the sort of roadmap from about 2012 was right. We cannot do what we want to do as dynamically, effectively and fluidly within our operation unless we start to develop a lot of our own tech. Because back then, Simon, a lot of the product we see now was just not available. So a lot of these SaaS-based products that actually add a real value and are pretty competitively priced now, they weren't available. We had to develop our own automated pricing tools, our preparation management flow system. This was all 2012, 2013. We started to use Auto Trader data for pricing around about 2014, 15. And I say we built that 360 view, and that's really what enabled us to start to accelerate the growth, because where we'd automated everything, where we had an overall view of everything that was happening within one of our branches, we could spin up an additional branch, just plug that bespoke system in, and we had a fantastic view of what was going on the branch without having to be hands-on. And I think that was always the concern in the early days. You know, when we had 4 sites in the south, all of us as directors could pop in within half an hour, check everything was being done as it should be. But when you've got a site, when your head office is Southampton, you've got a site in Falkirk, you cannot do that. So we needed that overall visibility. And it was really the tech. You know, it was the tech that drove that business forward and allowed us to accelerate. We built great relationships with lenders, funders, suppliers through that piece. But that's what took us from 2010, when I joined that business, selling 80 cars a month with one site, just about to open the second, to selling 2,000 plus cars in January 2020 out of 17 sites with an 18th about to open.
That's a pretty phenomenal growth from when you started to when you ended there. That's not that's small. That's huge, isn't it? You talked a lot about data there. Yeah. You talked a lot about tech. Now, you're not a tech guy by trade, are you? You're not a programmer.
No. Look, when I was 14, I bought a ZX81 and I could program in BASIC, right? And then went from ZX81. No, in fact, I had a ZX80 first, then ZX81, all the way through probably 15 different, up to Amiga and, you know, everything that people of my age probably went through at that stage. But I understand coding. I can't code, okay? I love the AI tools that are coming out now where you just tell it what you want to do and it develops the code. That's an interesting one, so worth looking at. But what that gave me an understanding of what it really was, what is the art of the possible. When we had our 7 developers, it was great because we could sit around a table and I could explain the vision. They'd go away and seek to deliver it. And if they were at any point saying, well, we don't know how to do that or we can't do it, I'd be trying to put solutions together to make that happen, really. So you're right, I'm not a coder, I'm not a developer. I say if you put a ZX81 back in front of me with a 16K RAM pack and I was programming away in BASIC, it would be fine. But that's a little bit backwards now to compare to where we are. So I think more for me, it was I'm a systems and a processes person. So, you know, I've been a salesperson in the past as well, so I understand how to deal with people, work with people. I've probably sold 2 cars in my life, Simon, if I'm honest, and that was on a day when I first joined Imperial and did a Saturday, and it was absolutely manic, and I just stepped in and we sold a couple of cars. So, but my where I get involved is in that process piece from start to finish. You know, when the customer first hits the website or first hits the aggregator channel, how do we bring that customer through the funnel? How can we optimize those opportunities? How can we make sure we haven't got leakage anywhere in that process?
I mean, it's quite amusing actually how similar our journeys have been, albeit we've ended up in maybe a slightly different point in the same industry. I mean, I also started with a ZX80 and through that same journey. But obviously I went through the software view.
Tom, and you know most people haven't got a clue what we're talking about when we go.
There are people out there who just don't know the pain of sitting programming your ZX81 for 4 hours typing code in and having that little RAM pack wobble and lose the whole darn lot.
Oh, mate. And having to use screen memory to release some more coding space. And yeah, those were the days. But I'll tell you what that did, Simon. That made us very efficient in coding.
Yeah, I think efficiency is everything, and I think that's quite interesting. I think I think one of the things that always interests me in terms of what you've described there is you need, by the sounds of it, I think I'm right, an awful lot of data points from an awful lot of points in the sales funnel, right the way from when you collect a lead all the way through to when you sell the car and how much profit you made on that, joining all the dots all the way along. There's a lot of data points that all need to be joined together. And from my experience, and I'm sure you're going to tell me exactly the same, tell me if I'm wrong, that is not a trivial challenge.
No, totally. And that's why in the end, we had to back then, and I'm talking again, 2014, 2015, 10 years ago, we had to develop our own system, okay? We were working with one of the big DMS providers at the time, and I'm talking one of the top three. And for after sales and accounts, it was okay. It did the job. But when we went into the sort of volume sale, used car retailing and preparation, it just did not cut the mustard, right? And no matter what we'd been promised, it was never going to be on the roadmap because they were dealing with the big manufacturers. So we just bit the bullet at that point. And you're right, these, within a customer journey now, there could be up to 20 touch points in terms of not necessarily contacting the dealer, but what they're doing and interacting with on the website, on the aggregator platform. And look, you were at the presentation back a few weeks ago with the IMDA, and it was just sort of highlighting to these dealers that there are so many lost opportunities in that journey where there are points of attrition. And when the opening question I asked those dealers on that day was, right, I'm sure last month you know how many cars you sold. And they all said, yeah. I said, well, put your hands up if you know how many cars you sold. All put their hands up. Right, now keep your hand up if you know how many leads you generated. Everybody put their hand down, which was not great for my presentation because I still had another 7 follow-on questions to ask, but we had to stop there. But it's that level, and you're looking at, and I know these guys are sort of owner-drivers that we were talking to that day, but even when you go into some of the bigger companies, just getting a lead number out of them, and if you haven't got your lead number and you don't know how many of those are unique customers, how can you work out your conversion? How can you work out your return on investment? How do you know which sales of your sales team are doing well and they're doing better than others, and which ones need help training or performance management? It's but that's a small part of it. Through that whole journey and the time that customers take the research, there are so many parts to that journey where a customer can just fall off the edge of the earth, as it were, and you will never know as a dealer they were even interacting with you because you haven't got them to a point where they're going to make contact by phone, WhatsApp, email, SMS, whatever channel they prefer to contact you. So it's a massive piece. And I understand, these dealers these days, especially the small and mid-range ones, are time poor, but it's a huge area where these incremental increases I talked about earlier can make a massive difference. Get people, if there's 10 points to your customer journey, add a % better opportunity to get them through each of those points. That's a 10% increase in performance. So you're selling 20 cars, you're now selling 22, making another 3-4 grand a month. So yeah, it's crucial, but I get it. I get it that dealers are time poor. So, as per the title of this podcast, it's about tech, and it's about understanding how tech can help you deliver that. Put those numbers in front of you in a way that's easy to consume. We don't want dealers having to log into 15 different platforms because they never do it. And I wouldn't do it. So that's why we built our own almost one sign-on, everybody gets access,
I think you steal a lot of my sales techniques and my things. I think the biggest thing that dealers challenge for me today is the amount of tech they have to play with. They have lots and lots of specialized systems at different points in their whole process, whether that's the actual sales process, the business process, the prep process, but also you then look at the website and the customer journey. There's just so much tech, and there are so many providers who have small parts of that tech.
Yeah.
You got, if you look at like the top end of the chain, just basic lead management, you've got people like, Auto Trader. Auto Trader is not really an advertising platform from the dealer's perspective. It's a lead management platform. It's generating leads for dealers. But then it does nothing with them once it's given it to you. You've then got to join the dots together.
Yeah.
I mean, do you share my view that the biggest challenge, I guess I shouldn't lead you to the question, but I will. Do you share my view that the biggest challenge for most dealers is they just cannot absorb all this different technology 100%. And make it work for them? They know it's there. They know they should be using it. And then when they try, the headache of actually making it work for them is bigger than what they perceive the benefit might be.
Yeah, and it is a minefield out there, right? It's a forest full of all these thousands of bloody trees of tech suppliers, and you have to work your way through it and pick your way through it. So part of what I do around that piece with dealers is say, okay, you've got a challenge here. I've got a couple of options for you. These are people I know. These are suppliers I know. I've either worked with in the past or I work with now who provide a tech solution for you that's pretty competitive, easy to access, easy to consume, and delivers value. Now, if I don't go in there and do that, these guys do not have the time or not necessarily the experience, I suppose. They're very experienced at selling cars, but they don't know where to go and look for this. So when they've got a challenge, so it might be a pricing challenge, right? There's a couple of really great automated pricing tools out there. But unless I go in and say, look, this product costs £250 a month. It's going to manage your pricing across your 300 cars. You don't have to sit there every day now or every week or once a week. This will do it daily. You set the rules, you get it going, you leave it to run. That works fantastically for a dealer. But then I'll have a dealer who I get them onboarded with it, and then all of a sudden their sales drop for a week and they say, switch it off. And I'm saying, whoa, don't switch the bloody thing off. Because if you switch it off for a week, in a week, you switch it back on and then it's going to be making some big changes, which you should be making incrementally during the week. So let it run. Don't panic. Don't knee-jerk. And then there's and others. I'll get tech in there for a month. They use it. They see some good results. The second month they decide, or don't decide. That's wrong. They don't have the time to get engaged with it. They then don't think it's delivering value, so they then bin that out as well. And it's sort of building these ecosystems for dealers, which are light touch for the dealer, right? So they're not having to log in. So if it's a buying system or something, it sends an alert to the dealer daily saying, this is the profile of stock you asked us to show you when it hits the site. Here it is. Go and have a look at it. So I suppose, yeah, your point's right. I feel sorry for dealers now, especially when they're at that level where they're trying to, the owner-drivers of these businesses are buying cars. They're trying to get the cars prepped. They've got to manage a couple of sales guys. They've got all the issues around finance that they're trying to resolve and work through. All the compliance, the level of due diligence now in compliance. I get it, but it's stifling dealers. So when you go in there and say, oh, how many leads you get? Oh, I haven't got time to look at that. It's like, yeah, but that's vital because at the front end, if you're not pumping enough in and your team aren't actually converting as they should be, you are missing massive opportunities, and then you'll think that the tech's not working, and then you'll bin out of it, and you're back to square one again. So, yeah, I just think they're overwhelmed sometimes at the moment.
Yeah, so I'm guessing, no, I know, that's where you step in with the dealers. That's what you offer to them. You offer to help them through that minefield and get them to a solution that works for them.
Yeah, definitely. And it's just and also, I understand there's no point in me. I can go into a dealer and throw 10 products at them that will help them in every part of that business. But actually what I've got to do is focus on the biggest pain points that they've got presently. And that might be in prepping the cars. They might be trying to prep 100 cars a month. They've got no system to manage it other than maybe a traditional workshop system, which isn't ideal for prep. I can offer them a solution at £200 a month that manages that for them perfectly. It might be pricing. I can offer a solution at £250 a month that suits them perfectly and does the job for them. But what I have to do is I can't load a dealer up with 10 products that's going to transform their business, right? Because none of them will get the attention. So I have to identify the highest points of attrition, really. If the pricing's a major issue because most of their cars are priced fair or high on Auto Trader because they're not getting the time to revisit that pricing, that's a tool I'll offer them. I'll then explain why it works because it'll be, well, hold on, I've got loads of margin in my cars. Well, yeah, you have, and that's why you're not selling them. Margins are vanity. Actual profit is sanity. So let's get realistic here and let's start, even if we test it. So I'll be able to get deals done on supplier products that might be a 30-day trial or a 90-day trial, and just get the dealer to commit, work with them, work through it with them, handle some of the reporting with them, and just get them to see the value. Sometimes the product doesn't work for them because they haven't got the right infrastructure to deal with it. But yeah, that's essentially where I sort of add value to a dealer. I'll go through that whole chain from sourcing through to sale, and then say, well, okay, the biggest problems you've got are here, here, and here. Right, let's see what solutions we've got. It might end up being, and a lot of the time, Simon, with the best will in the world, it ends up being a people problem. Because those people,
yeah.
Well, it does. And you go through the whole thing and say, well, actually, your process is pretty good. The problem you got is your people aren't following it.
Very
and
much
no one's pulling it up on it.
It sounds very much like, whilst we work in slightly different areas of the same business, the way we approach it. I mean, I obviously we have a large scale system, and I think the challenge we have is exactly the same as the challenge you have, in that getting dealers to absorb it. It's the classic, how do you eat an elephant? And the answer very much is one piece at a time. And I always think of what we do, and I think what you've described is very similar to what you do, is kind of like a staircase. You're at the bottom of the stairs here, and you want to get there. But if you try and do that in one step, you're going to collapse onto the floor because the step is too large. And you have to break that down into small, manageable bits where over time you can climb that staircase to the top. And get to something that really works. And it sounds like at Imperial, that staircase took years to grow, to walk up.
Yeah, definitely. I'd say we started that development program probably in about, we started it when we went on to the DMS. We noted there that there wasn't really any way of generating or recording appointments effectively the way that we wanted to do it through the contact centre. So we developed outside of that DMS our own appointment booking system. We then realised, probably 2012, there was nothing out there that helped us manage pricing. So we developed our own pricing system. We then started to think, well, okay, we've developed a pricing system, we've developed an appointment system, none of which can talk to the DMS because the DMS is a closed system. Why don't we just keep developing little modules and plugging them in until we get a fully blown system that works for us? And it sort of grew out of that. We didn't have the intention of setting out to develop our own bespoke DMS. That wasn't the intention, but it ended up that actually, as we increased our dev team from sort of 1 to 3 to 5 to 7, we then started to say, right, okay, we're starting to build a great system here. We just got a few areas we're missing now, so let's plug those in. Let's develop those. And at that point, we didn't use any third-party plugins or anything. We didn't want to have the issue that the third-party plugin supplier would change some of the code in, which then wouldn't work with what we were already plugging into. So we just went full bore, developed everything. We were one of the first to put 360 spins on the website, developed our own spinner. We were watching Verona in the States at the time. 2012, we started to watch those guys and what they were doing from a vehicle presentation perspective. So we just went ahead and developed it all ourselves, 360 camera, interior spins, all of that sort of stuff. And that stood us well because we also started to get a reputation within the industry of being sort of market leading. 2014, 15, we won multiple awards at Auto Trader Digital Awards, and it was because of what we were doing with tech. Now, don't get me wrong, that created a few issues within the business because we were putting all the information out there, and we'd have the sort of traditional sales team say, well, hold on, why are people going to ring us? You're giving them everything. How are we going to convince people to come in? You said, well, we shouldn't need to. If we're confident in our product, if we're confident in the price, if we're confident in how we're presenting, they'll come. Yeah, what's Field of Dreams? Build it and they will come, right? And that's how it worked.
It's quite interesting. I mean, that journey that you're describing that you went through, where you took Imperial Cars and one. You're looking now. I mean, Imperial Cars. You're talking about 13, 14 years ago. You started that journey. You're now in Motorvait, now going to dealers today. Where do you think that the average dealer that you speak to today is actually in that journey before you start? So thinking of, say, 2012 when you started, it's like the ground floor, and where maybe Imperial would have been if you'd carried on, would be today. Where's the average dealer when you start today? How well advanced is the motor trade today?
Well, if we sort of segment that, I suppose, to dealers, let's say dealers that are stocking up to 100 cars, for me, they're probably back in 2014, 15, where we were an Imperial world, right? So they're probably, and that's not that. I'm not saying they're 10 years behind the curve. I'm saying they're 10 years back from where we were at that point.
Yeah, you're probably 10 years ahead or 15 years ahead of the curve in some respects.
Yeah. And I think when you start to look at that, and I say that for me was crystallised at that presentation for the IMDA the other week, where the minimum you should know, whatever size a dealer you are, is how many leads you're generating and the cost per lead, and that's sort of basic a requirement for you to step on and do anything else. And if we go to the 100 to 500 dealers, then clearly they're going to be a little bit further forward because they may have better website systems, better back-end systems. But very few dealers, well, in fact, I can't think of any dealer that I go into today that is where we were probably 2017, 2018, apart from maybe top 10 independents and some of the larger franchise AM100. And you've got to have the will and the want to get there. Having said that, there are products that are out there that can, the preparation system that I go and talk about to dealers is probably the closest thing I've seen off the shelf that matched what we built. And that product that we built cost us tens of thousands of pounds. You can have that sort of technology now for £200 a month. Okay, so there are ways to get there, and I suppose another one of my other clients, which is of all places, Baltic States. So the largest used car retailer in the Baltic States, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Poland. Those guys have built all their own technology over a 7-year period. Absolutely phenomenal business. I was on a call with them yesterday. They are now examining the whole of a customer's journey from landing on the website through to sale using AI now, and they preloaded that AI with every step in the process. They're bringing in all the telephone conversations, they're bringing in all of the WhatsApp communications, email communications, and they're now scoring them with a RAG rating. When the dealer says, when that site says it's a lost sale, they score it with a RAG rating, and it then tells the sales manager there, without the sales manager having to listen or read anything, exactly what was said, what was done wrong, what was done right, where the improvements can be made. And this is a business that traditionally that region is sort of 10 years behind, 15 years behind UK, but these guys are stepping it up and going for it. And they've done a lot of what we did as well in terms of that development piece. And I would put them certainly top 5% of what I see in the UK.
Yeah, you mentioned AI in there, and I think AI has got a lot to play in the next 5 years on that journey. But it sounds like that in many dealers, and certainly my experience is that AI, if it's not careful, is just another bit of tech that is disjointed with the rest of the tech they've already got and becomes another platform to go on with the 10 they've already got, and makes existing business processes even more disjointed. And and the most important thing is not only the technology you use, but integrating that technology both with itself and with your overall business process. Because if you don't achieve that, you're just literally throwing mud at the wall and hoping some of it sticks.
Yeah, definitely. And I say the reason it works with the guys in Latvia is they did what we did. They built out their whole their web platform, their back end office system. They built it out all themselves, so they can embed AI where it can deliver massive value. They don't use AI chat. They don't use AI agents. They use traditional sales teams, but they're using AI to deliver more value, to not just randomly check a few salesmen's calls or saleswoman's calls to make sure they've said the right things. They're now able to do absolutely every interaction, review every interaction. So in the morning, the sales manager gets a report saying, oh, yesterday you closed off these customers. Actually, that one didn't have enough attention given here. Even works out the cadence of the speech. It works out the balance of communication. So if it's 70-30 one way, it should be 70-30 the other. So they put an inordinate amount of effort in building that knowledge base. So, you've got to know what you're doing. And AI is as you know, Simon, it's an often misused term these days. AI is the buzzword. True AI used correctly is phenomenal, but you've got to know how to use it right. Is it AI? Is it machine learning? There are some great tools out there for automated response now. There are some great tools that will take customer part way down the journey, and then as long as that AI or machine learning knows when to hand off when the time's right and you've got that customer committed and hand off to a person, fantastic. And I'm sure we're not far away. We're not far away from having almost fully automated AI chat agents, telephone audio agents. But again, it's about, you're right. If I went and dropped that into a dealer now, it would blow their minds, and certain elements of it are probably not where they need to be at the moment. So it's a difficult one.
Okay. Two things then.
Yeah.
One thing, very quickly, I said you were briefly with Cazoo. After you left Imperial. The Cazoo story is well known and didn't end up well, but it wasn't all bad, I guess.
No, and look, I mean, I got absolutely trolled on LinkedIn about a year and a half ago when I was on Used Car Dealer podcast saying that Cazoo did some phenomenal things, right? I still stand by that. What they did was change the customer journey and change the way customers bought cars. Now, did they get it right? Clearly not. But what they did was give customers a better way to buy cars. And none of us in the used car market prior to that, 2018, early 2019, mid 2019, none of us were prepared to put our head above the parapet and say, yeah, you can buy a car from us, we'll deliver it to you, and if you don't like it, we'll take you back in 14 days. None of us. Imperial, we looked at it, but we weren't prepared to do it. Yeah.
Everybody does that now. Yeah.
Well, they've got the option to do it now, and I think when you look at how they developed that platform, but even they were not used car people. So they were tech. It was a tech company that decided they wanted to sell used cars. And when we joined that business, we went through so many parts of that process with them. And this goes back to my points of attrition. We went through the journey and we said, well, okay, at the point of a part exchange valuation, what's your attrition rate, Cazoo? How many people do you lose from the journey? Because it was imperative to them that customer journey flowed right and they get as many people through the funnel, because they had no means to back it up with a customer service element, really. That journey was based on hitting the website, ending up putting the car into the shopping cart and buying it. But they had an attrition rate of 70% at the part exchange valuation time. They were matching one of the big online car buying services valuations. And we said to them, well, surely that's not good. You're losing 70% of people at this point. And it was almost a lack of understanding of what that meant, because they were able to pump in so many customers at the top of the funnel because of their marketing spend that actually it didn't really matter to them, because they were still getting what they needed through to the end of the funnel. But when you look at it, and this is where I urge dealers today to look at these points in the journey, because if you're just putting out a cat below value on your website, and you're not monitoring how many people are getting that valuation on screen, and you're not monitoring how many of them are there and inquiring, if you decided on certain make model derivatives that it was a retail car and actually you go to cap average on it, put a bloody cap average price out there so that the customer thinks, oh, actually, that's close to what I was expecting. I will carry on with my journey, rather than just think, I've got to give them a value, but I don't want to get caught out, so I'm going to give them a cap below value. You've got to look at that and say, well, how many times does the customer look at a valuation on your website? How many of them go on to actually inquire? And if that's only 10%, you've got a problem, because you're missing out on potential deals. You're missing out on, and it's this lost opportunity piece.
I mean, that's fascinating. I think a lot of people focus very much on where they're winning, but you sound like what you're saying is actually, where you're winning is a pat on the back, but it doesn't really improve what you do. You improve by looking at where you aren't doing so well. Yeah, that's the areas for improvement. Yeah. So to final then, in that last question, if you were sitting in front of a dealer and you were saying, what's the one thing that they can go away today after listening to this podcast, go away that will make a real difference to their business, whether that's maybe a medium-sized independent dealer, what could they do today? Okay, so today, if they're listening to this podcast and they go back to their office, I would say you've got to start to understand your numbers through the funnel. That's it. From website visit or aggregator impression through to interaction on the website, through to lead generation, through to lead conversion, right?
get your numbers, understand where those points of attrition are, work out the percentages through that funnel. Now, if they want to reach out to me, and for a very reasonable fee, Simon, I can help them with some benchmarking through there and show them what goods looks like. But for me, today, know how many visitors you get on your website, know how many leads you're generating, and know what your conversion is. Because from those three things, you can start to work out your cost per conversion, your return on investment. You know, if you can get to the point of acquisition, customer acquisition, great. Most dealers won't be able to. But at the very least, know what marketing channels are delivering, understand where the value is, and then you start to market a bit smarter. You move things around, you move budget around, and just look at that conversion. Once that lead comes in, what are you converting at? And is that acceptable? Are you burning leads? Are you blowing leads? Is there a lot of lead leakage? That's the starting point.
That's brilliant. I like that. Thanks very much for joining me today, Neil. That's been an absolutely fascinating wander through both your history, but also I think looking at where dealers need to be moving today. So if one of our listeners wants to connect with you and contact you, how can they find you?
Yeah, so they can go to the website, www.motorvait, that's motorvait.co.uk, or probably simpler, just reach out to me on LinkedIn. It's Neil Smith on LinkedIn, or go to @Motorvait and just DM me, direct message me.
Awesome. And that was the Dealer Tech Podcast. Thanks for listening today. If you found the episode useful, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a further episode. And if you want to go to our website, the www.dealertechtalk.uk, you'll find some useful online guides which you can download. And I might find a link from Neil that I can put into the show notes for something that he might have that's quite useful for you. Big thank you for listening today. And thank you to our sponsors, DMS Navigator and My Auto Companion. And look forward to seeing you soon.
Thanks very much.